March 1796. 600,000 soldiers, the most powerful army in the world, led by the greatest military mind in history. Within 1 year, 590,000 of them were dead, not killed by an enemy, killed by winter. This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who conquered all of Europe and then lost everything. Friends, this man, one of the greatest military commanders in world history. Even today, Napoleon's bold battlefield movements and extraordinary military strategies are studied in military academies across the world. At the peak of his power, almost all of Europe, except England, came under his control. The moment Napoleon took command of the Italian campaign, he ordered his soldiers to prepare for attack. Within just 1 month, he crossed the supposedly impassable Alps mountains and decisively defeated the combined armies of Sardinia, Piedmont, Austria, and several Italian states on multiple fronts. During this campaign, he personally took great risks and won unbelievable victories in the battles of Rivoli and Arcola. After conquering the Italian states, he established republics there based on the French model. Following the Italian campaign, Napoleon never looked back. When he returned to France, the French people welcomed him as a national hero. One challenge after another only strengthened his reputation, and eventually, in 1804, Napoleon became the Emperor of France. What was the secret behind Napoleon's success? Was it only his personality and ambition to achieve greatness? Or did the political and social conditions created by the French Revolution also play an important role? So let us now understand how a talented young man from a modest background rose to become the Emperor of France, and what ultimately led to the collapse of his empire. Early life and personality of Napoleon Bonaparte was born on August 15th, 1769, in Ajaccio, Corsica. His father's name was Carlo Bonaparte, and his mother's name was Letizia Ramolino Bonaparte. Just before Napoleon's birth, France had purchased the island of Corsica from the Republic of Genoa, an Italian state located in the Mediterranean Sea. In a way, Napoleon was an Italian by origin, but a French citizen. From childhood, Napoleon was introverted by nature. He loved reading and was deeply interested in geography, history, mathematics, and biographies of great leaders. He admired Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great. People often saw him drawing battle lines on the ground, building imaginary forts and then destroying them. Napoleon's father worked as a lawyer, but the family was not financially strong. So when France announced scholarships for students from Corsica to study in France, Napoleon moved there and joined the Brienne Military Academy. At the academy, another side of Napoleon's personality emerged. Most students there belonged to wealthy, aristocratic families. Because of his humble background, Napoleon often felt inferior among them. His fellow cadets also mocked his short height. It is very likely that this is where his hatred toward European aristocracy and noble elites first began to grow. During his academy years, Napoleon often spoke openly about freeing Corsica from French occupation. But later, he abandoned that idea. When the French Revolution began, Napoleon became deeply interested in the republican ideals of liberty and equality. He supported the Jacobin faction during the Revolution. Initially, Napoleon wanted to join the French Navy, but instead he was selected for the artillery division. In 1785, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the French army. Interestingly, most of the major battles during the French Revolution were fought on land. which gave Napoleon the perfect opportunity to showcase his military brilliance. To understand Napoleon's rise from a young military officer to the ruler of France, we must first understand the political conditions of France during that period. Rise of Napoleon. The French Revolution began in 1789, when representatives of the Third Estate declared themselves the National Assembly and challenged the monarchy of King Louis XVI. They aimed to establish a new political order based on liberty, equality, and fraternity. However, the early years of the revolution were filled with chaos and instability. Revolutionary groups like the Girondins and Jacobins constantly fought among themselves, while royalists conspired with foreign powers to restore the monarchy. At the same time, rulers of Austria, Prussia, and Russia feared that revolutionary ideas from France would spread to their own kingdoms. To stop this, they launched attacks on France and supported royalist forces inside the country. These conditions created the perfect opportunity for Napoleon to rise. Napoleon first proved his talent in 1793 at the port city of Toulon in southern France. Royalist rebels, supported by the British, had taken control of the city. Napoleon responded decisively. He ordered artillery attacks against the rebels and successfully forced the British fleet to retreat. His success at Toulon earned him the rank of brigadier general. After this victory, Napoleon began gaining popularity among the French people. Many believed he had protected not only French territory, but also the honor of France during difficult times. Then, in August 1795, Napoleon once again proved his abilities in Paris. Royalist supporters attacked the National Convention, hoping to overthrow the revolutionary government. Napoleon crushed the rebellion within hours and secured the city. From this point onward, national leaders could no longer ignore him. The public now viewed him as a strong and capable leader. Soon after, he was given full command of the French military campaign in Italy. As mentioned earlier, Napoleon achieved remarkable victories during the Italian campaign. He captured regions such as Nice and Savoy and defeated Austria. After Austria's defeat, Napoleon signed the Treaty of Campo Formio, which recognized the Rhine River as France's natural border. This treaty also revealed Napoleon's deep understanding of foreign policy and geopolitics by redirecting Austria's focus toward the Balkans, Turkey, and Russia. Napoleon indirectly weakened Austrian influence in Europe for years to come. Instead of burdening French citizens with taxes, he funded military operations using resources from conquered territories. At the same time, he sent valuable Italian artworks back to France, strengthening French museums and national pride. The efficient administration he established in conquered territories increased people's confidence in his leadership abilities. Meanwhile, the French public had grown frustrated with the corrupt Directory government. Inflation was rising, prices were increasing, and the value of French currency was falling rapidly. People no longer cared only about revolutionary ideals. They wanted economic stability and order. The wealthy class saw Napoleon as someone who could protect their property and bring growth, while the poor saw him as a source of security and hope. Even the Directory government became afraid of Napoleon's growing popularity. To keep him away from France, they sent him on a military campaign to Egypt in 1798. Napoleon accepted the mission calmly and strategically. This showed another important side of his personality: patience. He knew that the political conditions in France were not yet fully favorable for him. Napoleon invaded Egypt and defeated the Mamluk forces near Cairo in the Battle of the Pyramids. However, shortly afterward, the British Navy under Admiral Nelson destroyed the French fleet in the Battle of the Nile. Despite this setback, Napoleon refused to lose confidence. In a controversial but bold decision, he secretly left his army in Egypt and returned to France with a few trusted companions. By the time he returned, the French people were completely frustrated with the corrupt Directory government. No one even questioned the failure of the Egyptian campaign. The public was simply happy to see Napoleon back. Napoleon himself reportedly said, "It seems everyone was waiting for me. If I had arrived earlier, it would have been too soon. If I had arrived later, it would have been too late. I arrived at exactly the right moment." Napoleon understood that this was his golden opportunity. With the support of his allies, he overthrew the Directory government in a coup. After the coup, France adopted the consulate system, where executive power was placed in the hands of 3 consuls. Napoleon himself became the first consul. Under the new constitution, elections were held, and citizens over the age of 30 were given voting rights. The people approved the new political system. Thus, in November 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte became the most powerful man in France. As ruler, Napoleon introduced several important reforms. His success increased both his confidence and his popularity. People trusted him completely. Finally, in 1804, Napoleon abandoned the title of First Consul and officially crowned himself Emperor of France. This decision shocked Europe and also marked the beginning of his downfall. The downfall of Napoleon. Despite Napoleon's early success in restoring stability to France, the 10 years following his coronation as emperor were filled with growing failures. At first, Napoleon had brought peace to Europe, but gradually he began dreaming of complete French domination over the continent. England quickly realized Napoleon's ambitions. Britain feared that if he was not stopped soon, he would become the dictator of Europe. So Britain formed the Third Coalition against France, bringing together Austria, Russia, and other nations. In 1805, Napoleon launched a campaign against Austria with 40,000 soldiers, and once again achieved victory through brilliant military strategy. His speed, tactics, and battlefield movements were unlike anything Europe had ever seen. But after defeating Austria, Napoleon turned toward Britain. At that time, Britain's Royal Navy was considered the strongest naval force in the world. Napoleon knew this well, yet he still challenged Britain at sea. Near Cape Trafalgar, off the coast of Spain, the British Royal Navy clashed with the French coalition fleet in one of history's most famous naval battles. Napoleon suffered a crushing defeat. This conflict became known as the War of the Third Coalition. Although this defeat delayed Napoleon's plans to invade Britain, it did not destroy his power. In the same year, Russia and Austria attacked France again, believing Napoleon had become weak, but they underestimated him. Napoleon marched into Germany, defeated enemy forces, and then achieved one of his greatest victories in the Battle of Austerlitz. There, he defeated both the Russian and Austrian empires together. After this victory, Austria signed the Treaty of Pressburg and surrendered Vienna. Napoleon had once again established dominance over Europe. In 1807, Napoleon attacked Russia and forced it into signing the Treaty of Tilsit. By 1810, Napoleon controlled or dominated most of Europe, including Belgium, the Netherlands, Spain, Germany, parts of Poland, and the Balkans. Yet one nation still troubled him: Britain. To weaken Britain economically, Napoleon launched the Continental System, an economic blockade designed to cut Britain off from European trade. He banned European nations from trading with Britain and allowed British ships to be seized. Napoleon hoped Britain would eventually surrender under economic pressure, but Portugal refused to obey his orders. Napoleon invaded both Spain and Portugal, triggering rebellions across the region. Britain then sent forces under Arthur Wellesley, later known as the Duke of Wellington, to support resistance movements in Spain and Portugal. This gave Britain a foothold in mainland Europe. Meanwhile, the blockade backfired. Smuggling increased, prices rose sharply across Europe, and economic suffering spread everywhere. Nationalist movements began emerging throughout Europe. Managing such a massive empire became increasingly difficult for Napoleon. Revolts erupted in Spain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia. At the same time, Napoleon divorced Josephine in 1810 because he needed an heir. He married Marie-Louise, daughter of Austrian Emperor Francis I, and later had a son. Then came the campaign that destroyed him. In 1812, Napoleon gathered 600,000 soldiers near the Russian border to force Russia into supporting the blockade against Britain. Initially, Napoleon captured Moscow, but winter was approaching. As Napoleon's army retreated, Russian forces attacked relentlessly. Thousands of French soldiers died from freezing temperatures, hunger, and exhaustion. By the time Napoleon returned, only around 10,000 soldiers remained capable of fighting. The disastrous Russian campaign shattered his empire. In 1813, Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Sweden united against him in the Battle of Leipzig, also called the German Campaign of 1813. Napoleon suffered another devastating defeat. In March 1814, enemy armies entered Paris. Napoleon was forced to abdicate and was exiled to the island of Elba. But even in exile, Napoleon closely watched events in France. In 1815, he escaped from Elba and returned to Paris. The French people welcomed him once again. However, European powers quickly united against him. In June 1815, Napoleon launched one final campaign in Belgium. But on June 18, 1815, at the Battle of Waterloo, the Duke of Wellington defeated him once and for all. This time, Britain exiled Napoleon to St. Helena, a remote island in the South Atlantic Ocean, far away from Europe. He spent the final 6 years of his life there in isolation. He ate, played cards, wrote memoirs, and reflected on his life. In 1821, Napoleon Bonaparte died from stomach cancer. But before leaving the world, he had already written his name permanently into the history of Europe.